This episode has been brought to you by JustNForm.com. If you're tired of being censored, tired of having your data stolen and sold, go to JustNForm.com, a social media site where all voices are welcome.
Oftentimes when you see conversations about 2016, whenever Hillary Clinton is brought up, whenever Donald Trump is brought up, you hear people always use this phrase, Bernie would have won. And I challenge them. I say, I don't think that's accurate. And when they ask me why, I tell them, Bernie has already won. Say what you want about the man. Maybe if you're defining your victories through how the establishment has defined them, through the establishment lens of wins and losses in the columns of elections, then yeah, maybe he lost. But you don't run smear campaigns against someone you don't fear, right? You don't lie in polls against someone you don't fear. You don't rig elections against someone you don't fear. You don't establish special rules for a candidate that you don't fear. And in politics, you only fear someone when they are a legitimate threat to take you down personally, and when they're a legitimate threat to influence an ideology and put forth policies and force you to vote for those policies or lose your office that would be contrary to what your donors would prefer. Once again, Bernie Sanders has demonstrated that there is more than one way to win an election. There is more than one way to achieve a mandate. And you don't have to be inaugurated on January 20th to make that happen. Yesterday, I received a text message from Fight for 15 saying that there's legislation being introduced to the Senate floor to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And I was like, really? Because I'm like, the Democrats would have to back this. And even some Republicans would have to back it. And that would mean that the Democrats are actually trying to do something in the Senate and set up themselves for success going forward. Like they actually may want to win in 2020. And then I get an article. And of course, Bernie Sanders starts talking about it, saying the exact same thing. And this is according to Mother Jones, led by Bernie Sanders, you know, the guy who isn't a real Democrat. Led by Bernie Sanders, Democrats introduced legislation to raise the minimum wage. On Wednesday, a coalition of congressional Democrats introduced legislation that would raise the federal minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 an hour by 2024. That would be almost doubled. Just a few short years ago, we were told that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour was radical, said Senator Bernie Sanders, who sponsored the legislation in the Senate. He continued to say, but a grassroots movement of millions of workers, which I am proud to have marched and worked with the $15 an hour coalition, the Fight for 15 coalition in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and Durham, North Carolina. But the grassroots movement of millions of workers throughout history of this country refused to take no for an answer, he added. The current $7.25 an hour federal minimum wage is a starvation wage, and that is true in every sense of the word. The article continues to say, for the past 2 years, Senator Sanders has introduced similar versions of the bill to raise the federal minimum wage floor to $15 an hour. But this time, the legislation is bolstered by steadily increasing public support and the work of groups like Fight for 15. Shout out to you guys. Go follow them on Twitter to keep updated with the constant fight for fair wages. But it says it's been bolstered by the support of Fight for 15 that helped raise the minimum wage in cities and states across the country. While the bill still has a good chance of passage The Democratic-controlled House, it does. It faces an uphill battle to get through the Republican-led Senate and off the president's desk. That is going to be the difficult part. In November, top White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow called a federal minimum wage a terrible idea. Basically, what Kudlow just said is, I don't want to honor the labor laws that are already in place. People forget FDR created the federal minimum wage because corporations are not incentivized to take care of their workers. They're incentivized to take care of their shareholders. And corporations are going to make sure they're lining their own pockets before they line anyone else's pockets. And it's oftentimes, believe it or not, it's oftentimes to the detriment of corporations. But let's go ahead and continue. No person working full-time in America should be living in poverty, said Robbie Scott, Democrat from Virginia, chairman of House Committee on Education and Labor, in a statement, said raising the minimum wage is not only good for workers, but it is also good for businesses and good for the economy. Woo! $15 an hour minimum wage would give a raise to nearly 40 million Americans. Oh my God, how could that possibly be bad for the economy when that would be 30% of the workforce? And of course, that would likely mean that other people would get raises as well in order to keep jobs competitive. Now, someone may say, how could that possibly raise the minimum wage? Well, let me explain something about the economy, people, because a lot of people don't understand the economy. They listen to this trickle-down economics nonsense, which is BS. The guy who actually created trickle-down economics said that it was never meant to work. Ronald Reagan had to steal money from Social Security and put it back in the treasury because of how bad trickle-down economics is. The assumption that corporations, if given tax breaks, will reinvest that back into their business, it's a logical fallacy, because they constantly get subsidies and tax cuts from the government anyway, and they're then taking those profits and reinvesting those into the business. But the subsidies and tax cuts are going to go right into the pockets of the corporate CEOs, VPs, presidents, CEOs, whatever. This is a fact. This is what history has shown us. So what are the other options? The other option is to raise the wages. Why is raising the wages a good idea? Because you take power out of the hands of the corporations and you put it into the hands of the consumers. It has two functions. Now, I am not a slave to Walmart, or I'm not a slave to McDonald's. I can start to save up my money because I am making enough to do so. Right? I can take time off of work. I can go part-time. I can go part full-time and start saving up money to pay for school, for example. Maybe save up for a car. Maybe save up for a house, because we're going through a housing crisis right now because people can't afford it. Help pay off student loans. In other words, you're no longer a slave to your job because you have the financial means to leave it one day. That's extremely important. Furthermore, if everyone is making at least $15 an hour, now, guess what? You have more spending power. And what do you think is going to happen when you have more spending power? You're not limited to only shopping at Walmart because of low prices. You're not limited to only shopping at Amazon for low prices. You are no longer at the convenience of corporations. Now corporations are at your convenience. So maybe I don't want to wait for Amazon to give me something. Maybe I want to go to the small business down the street from my house, and I can afford to do that now. And the small businesses will then benefit from that, right? Because the consumer has the spending power. When people make the argument, oh, small businesses will be hurt, we've seen small businesses hurt in very small and very marginal situations across the country. And it's because the federal minimum wage isn't $15 an hour across the board. We can never really know what's going to happen, but just based off of what we already know about economics, the only people who spend money consistently are the middle class. Rich people tend to hoard money. Therefore, it is never going to go back into the economy, which is why income inequality is so bad as it is. People in the middle class tend to spend money. That means the housing market booms. That means small businesses boom. That means we have more small businesses starting up. That means competition is better. That means you can afford a car now, or you can pay to take Uber more often. That's also fine. You can save up money. You can afford an emergency that's more than $1,000 without worrying about going into the poorhouse. It's quite simple. I don't understand what the debate is, but the debate honestly is centered around myths like, oh, the federal government doesn't have anything to do with minimum wage, when the only reason the federal minimum wage exists was because FDR made his career off of this, off of the labor movement. It's always been raised by the federal government. Now, there are some people who will have you believe that Republicans just don't want the federal government involved in raising wages. They don't want the government involved in the economy. They'll lie to you like that. But North Carolinians, for example, and people from, I believe it was Missouri, they know that that's not the truth, because the economy of Charlotte, North Carolina, needed the minimum wages to be raised to $15 an hour in order to remain a competitive big city. That's where the Carolina Panthers play, in case you did not know. It's also where Queen's University is. A couple of big culinary schools are there as well, along with a couple of fashion schools as well. So it's a very popular area. It's a very populated area, and it's growing more populated, but it's also becoming more expensive to live there. So they had to raise the minimum wage. Guess what the HB2, what they call the bathroom bill did? It was the Republicans. The Republicans were actually making an attempt to deny the ability for a municipality to raise wages according to their economies. Now, Republicans, riddle me that. Riddle me that. They don't want to pay you because of one thing and one thing only. The people in charge want more money, plain and simple. And they want to limit your opportunity to make more, because capitalism, the crony capitalism that we have always existed in, has never existed to create competition, despite popular belief, despite everything we're taught in Econ 101. It is actually created to stifle and destroy competition. And these are the facts. So thank you so much for Bernie Sanders. Thank you for everybody who supported this legislation. Thanks to Fight for 15. I can't tell you all how hard, I can't say enough how hard Fight for 15 works. I've seen it in person. I've seen McDonald's workers that live paycheck to paycheck go on strikes all over Chapel Hill, Raleigh, and Durham, sacrificing food in their kids' mouths to fight for this cause. We got somebody from the Fight for 15 movement to come and speak whenever I was president of Carolina Students for Bernie Sanders. And wow, it was just the insight, the dedication to the movement. Not only did it showed the conviction, but also it just showed how fed up people are to even get to this point. And so, special shout out to Fight for 15. I'm glad that your voices are finally being heard and taken seriously. And let's see if the Democrats come through this time, with people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib, and even Ro Khanna to a degree, led by Bernie Sanders. I think we could see a real push for a living wage in this country. I'd love to know your thoughts about this. Leave a comment below. Thanks for watching that segment of Mi Casa es Su Casa. You can donate to our Patreon and keep helping the network grow by clicking on the link in the description below. And also, make sure you join us at JustNForm.com. And finally, make sure you subscribe to us on Roku and be part of the very first independent news network on Roku TV. But more than anything else, always remember, find your balance. Peace.